Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, Mental Health and Wellness. And today I have a story out of Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And this story is dear to my heart because this story is about a young man that had schizophrenia. Now, this young man was 18 years old, and for some reason he got off of his medication and he started to, he left the house and he started to go to the neighbor's house and he was threatening the neighbors and he was threatening his family members. But he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. So, he should have been taking his medicine. Now, I'm going to just play this video so you can just kind of see a little bit about this story. Okay.
Cedar Rapids police officers have arrested 3 people in the death of their 18-year-old brother in Cedar Rapids.
Police officers responded to the 2500 block of Romig Street Southwest, where they found the body of Ezekiel Basami.
Ezekiel's 3 brothers are Christian, Pierre, and Azain Basami. They're charged with involuntary manslaughter, assault causing bodily injury, and false imprisonment. This all started back in November of last year. On the 9th, police say they responded to the home on Romig Street for a report of a death. Officers arrived and found Ezekiel dead inside. Now, a search warrant shows Ezekiel, who had schizophrenia, was also having an episode and acting erratic on the Sunday before. He then became aggressive, and 2 brothers tied him to a mattress on Tuesday, and he was tied to that mattress until Thursday morning when they noticed he had little to no pulse. The family then determined he died on Friday, but didn't call the police until the following day.
Okay, so now the story is just, it's really sad. And then there's a lot of questions about the story. The young man that passed, his name was Ezekiel, and he was 18 years old. Now, the other brothers, he had 3 brothers. Christian, who was 29, Pierre, who was 26, Azan, who was 23. Now, it doesn't say anything about the mother. It doesn't say anything about the father. But they all lived in this home together. And so when the younger brother, the 18-year-old, the one that died, when he somehow or another he went through the window. They were trying to keep him in the house. But he was able to get through the window. And he went in the neighborhood and he was just threatening, everybody in the neighborhood. And so what the brothers did, the 3 brothers, what they did was they managed to get a hold of him. They brought him back in the house. They tied him to the bed with some ropes. Okay. Now, they thought that these ropes was going to hold him down, but it didn't hold him down. And they said in the report that he wasn't drinking, he wasn't eating, and so now after they tied him with the ropes didn't work. So he managed to get out of the house again. So now this time he starts to threatening the neighbors again, and one of the neighbors said, if you come back here, I'm going to shoot you. Okay, so now the brothers get a hold of him again, and they tie him down to the bed again, but this time they use what's called a ratchet straps, and I guess he couldn't get out of that because they said that that's what you use to tie down cargo. So they use these straps on him, so there's no way that he could get out of that. So now he's tied to the bed, and why the brothers didn't call 911, I don't have any idea. They didn't call the police. They didn't call 911. Now, I can kind of understand why they didn't call the police, because if you have an African-American man, threatening people, it's very possible that he wouldn't do what the police tell him to do either. And, that might end up in the police shooting him, especially because Well, you know the kind of world we live in. So I can kind of understand why they didn't call the police, but they should have called 911. Okay. Okay. So now what happened is that he's tied to the bed and he starts to smell. And when they went to check on him, one day, he was cold and he was dead. So now they're forced to call the police. So now they call the police, and the police ask them, how long has he been tied to this bed? And they said since Tuesday. Now, this is Saturday. And so all of these days now has went by. Now, this was on Thursday, though, when they went to check on him. This was Thursday, and they saw that his body was cold and he was dead. And so they waited until Saturday to call the police. So now when the police gets there, he's deceased. And so now these three brothers have been charged with manslaughter. And that's because, they didn't call the authorities, and they tied him to the bed. And so when they did the autopsy said that he was dehydrated, and he died from dehydration, and he died from starvation. But according to the brothers, it was only 4 days that he was tied up. So now that makes me to believe that he was tied up for a lot longer than 4 days. And the only reason why they called the police was because he was deceased and he had started smelling. So this story is just so sad. It doesn't mention anything about the parents. Because you got, 4 brothers, all under the age of 30. And it doesn't say anything about the parents. So it's just really sad because they could have called 911. When he first started acting erratic, they could have called 911. When he was threatening neighbors, they could have called 911. They didn't have to call the police. They could have called 911. So this story is the reason why they need to start teaching mental health in the schools. They really need to start teaching mental health. Because if they start teaching mental health as early as middle school, don't wait. High school is too late. I think the beginning of middle school, start teaching about mental health. Now, something like this, it could have been avoided because now these 3 brothers are going to prison, for manslaughter because they were charged with their brother's death. Now, mental illness is something that, a lot of people don't understand it. And that's because we never been taught. We never been taught about mental illness. It's like we have to learn it on our own. We have to learn it from our own experiences. And we shouldn't have to learn it that way. We shouldn't have to learn it that way. You shouldn't have to experience it to learn it. It should be taught. It should be taught. Mental health is just as important as math, English, science, social studies, gym. You have all of these classes. They even teach you, home economics, sewing, what's that other class? Woodworking. They teach you all of these things in school, but where is mental health? I had a health class when I was in school. I believe I was in middle school, and it was called health. But it wasn't mental health. It was just health. Okay. So, I'm just advocating for, a lot of people that don't have a voice. Those three brothers, they made a mistake. They should have called 911 and they didn't. Now, it's possible that those three brothers could have had some type of mental illness. It's very possible. So, because schizophrenia, their brother had it, so schizophrenia, it could have ran in their family. The reason why I wanted to do this story is because, this is the type of things that if we were educated, I'm going to say we, and the reason why I'm saying we is because when I was in school, I wish that they had a class for mental health, not just health, mental health. I wish all the things that I've learned on my own through experience, I wished I had learned all those things when I was in school. Okay, so if you like this video, you can give it a like and subscribe and tell me what you think about this story. Do you think that the brothers, do you think that maybe they could have had a mental illness? Do you think that maybe they were just so scared to call the police or even 911? But they should have called at least 911. But they didn't know. They didn't know. And I don't really think they were trying to kill their brother. They wasn't trying to kill their brother. But they just didn't know what to do. Okay, so if you like this video, you can give it a like and subscribe and leave me a comment about what you think about this story. And I will see you in my next video. Okay, goodbye.